Everybody has basic accounting needs. The smallest of businesses have that. I think we are going to find as ESG reporting requirements spread over the longer term, we're going to find that every business will have some kind of ESG reporting requirement. They vary from state to state and from country to country. But I think as those mandates get rolled out, we're going to see them reaching further and further. You're going to see businesses of all sorts have different mandates and have to report on them.
All right, on this episode of the Modern CPA Success Show, we often look across the industry and try to look out in the future. We've got a great guest today for helping us do that. Before we get into that, my name is Tom Waddleton. I'm a virtual CFO with Anders. My usual co-host is here, Adam Hale, who runs our virtual CFO practice. Adam, welcome.
Hey, Tom.
And then, Adam, we've got Daniel Hood with us today, and Daniel's the editor-in-chief of Accounting Today. Daniel, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me. I'm psyched to be here.
Would love to hear a little bit more about you before we jump into the topic. So a little bit about career journey and what's gotten you here today.
It's a little weird. I started out in production and design in magazines and newspapers, and there was a period where, because of technology magazine, production and design and editing kind of combined, and they said, well, you can do the production and design part, and we know you can spell, so we'll make you an editor. So I sort of randomly fell into that, and then randomly fell into covering accounting about roughly 25 years ago, 26 years ago, and have worked for Accounting Today ever since, first as managing editor, and then I've been editor-in-chief for since about 2012. So I spent a lot of time watching the profession and trying to learn how to do what I'm supposed to do.
All the cool professions were taken. You're like, I got to cover accounting.
I have to say, I work for a company that owns a number of B2B publications, right? A bunch of different industries, law, financial planning, banking, that sort of thing. And I can tell you, of all those audiences, I would far rather work with the accountants than anyone else. Accountants are fantastic. They tell you everything that's going on. They're open and honest, and they share with they're passionate about what they're doing. So yes, when I first started, I was like, ooh, accountants, I'm going to be able to handle this? And it turned out the best choice I could have made of all the different professions that we had on offer. You guys are the best.
He's already buttering us up. He's good.
It is. Listen, I got a lot of favors to ask at the end of this.
Well, let me start with maybe it's a big topic. We'll see. So let me set the stage. Once per quarter, our leadership team gets together and focuses on kind of, hey, where are we going? We're getting together in January and we're looking at the whole year, and then we also look by quarter. One of the questions we often ask ourselves is, what's the next big thing that we could go after? And often in accounting today, people are often talking about value-based pricing. We're talking about more advisory, things like that. But would love to have you say, as you're looking out and what you're hearing, what do you think are some of the big things that would be significant change and good for services and whatever you're seeing?
Right. It's a huge long list of things. You've touched on a couple, and value pricing for a lot of firms is something that they're either just starting in or haven't really gotten into yet at all. And they need to work on that. Advisory services is a huge thing. And it's an interesting because it's a big umbrella. There are a lot of things that go underneath that, from upskilling your staff, which is an issue that touches a lot of other areas, to the technology used to bring in to enable your advisory services, to what kind of clients do you want to work with. So that's another huge umbrella. Obviously, AI, I think, is a big one. One of the ways to triage this, right, is think how quickly do you need to focus on these things. I think value pricing and advisory services are probably a little closer in. Like, you should probably have been thinking about them for the past year or so, or maybe a little longer than that. And AI, I think, is still, while it's something that the firms need to start thinking about, I think they can start thinking about it. And there's still some time for education, and it's not yet a crucial thing that you have to work into your practice. I think succession planning, obviously, is still a big issue for a lot of firms. We're still seeing the ongoing retirement of the baby boom generation, how that's playing out. Staffing is still an issue. It's eased a little bit. Capacity problems are a little simpler, particularly for larger firms, but there's still plenty of concern there and plenty of things firms need to do to keep up. I always like to throw out ESG. It's a little bit of a pause right now. I think over the long term, we're going to find ESG is one of the big opportunities of the next 10 years and going forward from there. I think it's going to be enormous for the profession.
Interesting.
How so? I mean, can you explain a little bit of ESG? I mean, for me, it's always been, I don't know, it's been hard to articulate, and it seems like it's kind of a big firm thing. Big four, not really reaching out to the rest of us very much.
Yep, and I think that's a fair assessment. Certainly, right now, and for the near term, it is going to be a much more of a large firm thing. But I think over time, we're going to find it comes down to kind of every firm in sort of the way that everybody has bookkeeping, right? Everybody has basic accounting needs. The smallest of businesses have that. I think we are going to find as ESG reporting requirements spread, that spreads down to from the big, sort of SEC type reporting companies. It's going to spread down to their suppliers and their providers, and eventually, and this is a longer term to be perfectly clear. Over the longer term, we're going to find that every business will have some kind of ESG reporting requirement. They may not all be the same. They may be very different. They may vary from state to state and from country to country. But I think as those mandates get rolled out, we're going to see them reaching further and further. And that's why I say it's a longer term thing. It's even much longer term than AI, which is probably going to be important, in the next year or so. ESG will probably take anywhere from 5 to 10 years. But what's going to happen is that you're going to see businesses of all sorts have different mandates and have to report on them. And it's a whole new set of reporting for them. And who's better at that than accountants? So what you're going to see is two things. You're going to see, obviously, the audit and the test aspect of it, which is going to be great for particularly larger firms. But you're also going to see the systems setup issue, right? The consulting aspect of it is saying, hey, you're a small business, but you work with a local Walmart or any other business that's slightly larger than you, or you want to borrow money from a bank. They're going to be asking you about these issues. So you're going to need to have reporting systems in place to deal with that. So there's going to be an enormous consulting and assistance opportunity there. And I think that'll be true for firms of all sizes. It will take some time. I always want to actually clarify that very, give serious clarification to that. But I think it will be, like I said, 10 to 15 years. We're going to find that is, I think, as big a service area as any other.
Would you agree that it's for accounting firms to lose that business because there's a lot of competition because there's a lot of non-financial?
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, 100%. Yeah, no, and it's a fantastic point because there is no mandate for it for CPAs to do it or for accountants to do it. Right now, it's anybody,
Right.
and now that may change as the standards get set, and there's going to be a million different standards for every different aspect of ESG. It's a big thing, a big area. But I think what you're going to find is that if accountants don't do it, as you say, plenty of other people more than happy to jump in there. Does not require an accountant. It's just who's better at figuring out a reporting system for a business. Who else does that?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's absolutely accounting firms to lose, but it's easy to lose.
And I can tell you a quick story about that. Probably 15 years ago, I worked at a Fortune 500 company, and I was in the external reporting group. So we produced the annual report and the 10Qs, all that stuff. Chief accounting officer asked me to look into this. Can you look into these sustainability reports, and should we be producing one? And all the people I interviewed in finance said, nobody cares, don't do it, all this stuff. Part of my research was literally Googling things, and I found out that our company had published their second report. And so I'm reading it, and I even interviewed our external accountant and said, what do you think? They're like, yep, don't want to. They went out and got a non-accounting firm. It had financial data. And so I called my friend who was a VP in corporate affairs. I'm like, where'd you get this? He goes, I just took your annual report and took those same numbers. But everyone then freaked out, like, how can they do this? And he was like, it wasn't that hard. So
Right.
to me, it was funny that finance thought if we do it, obviously we own it. And the external accountant said, if the company does it, obviously we'll do it. And for 2 years, they didn't even know what was going on for that to be done. So maybe it'll be more often that happens.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I will say that in terms of audit, right? The amount of audit that's owned by the accounting profession just by mandate and then just sort of by custom, there will be the accounting profession. I think it will own a big chunk of this, but it won't own anywhere near the 100% basically that it owns of financial statement audits.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much room for other people, unless governments and regulators start coming in and saying, yeah, mandating you have to do it with the public accountant, which I suspect it's way too early to even begin to guess at that. My suspicion is they might not say that. They might say, listen, we want to get this done, so we'll open it up to anybody who wants to get in there. But I just think it's the potential when you think if every company in the world has to report the way they do now with their accounting and their financial statements, and right, from small businesses to large businesses, how you have to report, who you have to report to, varies differently. But at some point, they all need to do some reporting work. Just double that market, and I think that's what ESG is going to look like.
It's a great point.
We're always trying to kind of think about the future, but I mean, obviously, you said you've covered the profession. We know for a long time, and accounting today is, major resource for the space. Have you seen anything like any kind of trends that you can remember or think of that people were always kind of panicking about over the last couple decades that actually never even really happened?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's one big one that always comes to mind, which is blockchain.
That's what I was thinking.
Interesting.
And I'd have to think of it because that so crowds out everything else that it's tough. And it really did sort of, right? I mean, everyone thought, oh, it's going to destroy the audit. It's going to destroy auditors. It's going to change how everything we do. And it just sort of disappeared. I mean, obviously, blockchain didn't disappear. It got baked into a lot of things and so on, but it didn't make a huge change for the whole profession the way we thought it did. And I think one of the weird things about that, sorry, I'm tangentialing here for a second, is that I think that maybe it's a little bit of a problem for when people are looking at AI. They're thinking, well, is it really as big a deal as they say it is? Remember, blockchain turned out to be nothing. And I think, when you look across the profession, there's always a tendency to say, well, is this really going to be a big deal? Do I have to do this? Do I have to worry about this? And any argument you can use to prevent you from having to make a change always comes in handy. And I think, unfortunately, blockchain is going to be a good example or a good argument for people who say, well, let's wait and see what's going on with AI. Let's wait and see.
Hey, I was one of those people. I was like, blockchain, if this is real, but it's kind of like crypto. I felt like it was so hard to understand that most people just kind of gave up on it. Whereas like AI now in micro doses, obviously people are experiencing it at every level. So I think people might be able to, conceptualize that. But I guess, I mean, is there a headline, you wish you could write, but the profession's just not ready for? I mean, that might run in line with the AI, but just kind of curious from your perspective. Is there something you wish you could write about that you'd say, hey, we did this, that kind of.
Right. I keep going back to one of the things I've been waiting for a long time, and this isn't quite the same as blockchain, but it's the continuous audit. People talk about. I feel like I'm focusing on audit, but that we don't usually focus this much on audit. But I have always been waiting for the continuous audit to come along for people to say it's kind of silly that we do, an audit once a year. With our systems are up in place to do it now. We could do, people are even talking about reducing the quarterly reporting mandates to semi-annually. And it seems like, with the systems we have in place, why aren't we doing much more of a sort of regular, just constant check-in? And I think that would be a neat thing for the profession. Like the profession could turn around and say, listen, we've always got your back. We're always not looking, that's creepy, but we're always sort of keeping an eye on your financials and making sure that you're doing what you need to be doing from whether it's as a public issuer or even just we're looking at your business all the time. Now we're starting to see that with smaller firms, right? With CAS, that's kind of the whole thing of CAS is we're with you every day, which I think is spectacular. And I think it's one of the best things about CAS is that sort of listen, we've got your back all the time, and I think that can expand into audit as well. I'd love to see that because I think that would change markets in a way that public company accounting and auditing hasn't really in the past. I think it'd be a neat change. I don't know if that was.
No, that's great. Actually, I mean, that's kind of a relevant thing too, because I mean, whenever you're thinking about like value-based billing and pricing and all those kind of things, a lot of times tax definitely to some degree, but more than anybody, I think auditing feels like they're kind of left out of that conversation. Whenever it comes to value-based billing, it's like, no, I do these set of tasks, and not to say that they don't believe what they do is valuable, but they know they're kind of more compliance driven. Right. And I think that a differentiator could be, and I've kind of talked about that. It's like one of the, obviously most audits are fixed fee, but then how can you bring the value? If you had some kind of continual close, it's like you said, like maybe not sampling the exact same thing every single month, but maybe sampling a variety of different things over time, like having these stage things. You break your audit season down from being this like really clumpy thing to, essentially what, that's kind of our background from tax. That's how CAS really came about. It's like trying to get away from tax season, right? So
yeah. No, I love that. And then because the real problem with the value of the audit isn't that we don't know what the value is. It's that does the client actually see it, right? They see it as a compliance exercise. But if you're sitting with them every day saying, not every day or whatever, however frequently you are, and saying, we're preventing you from making terrible mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
that will get you in trouble in 12 months. If you stop it now, you're okay. If you wait 12 months until we see it in an audit, then things are even worse. And as you say, sort of looking at different things every month or whatever the period is, it'd be great.
Yeah, because I mean, the audits are 6-12 months behind anyway, and by then it's like, but it does very much. I mean, I guess the audit standards would probably maybe have to change just whenever they go back for the look back periods and stuff like that. So there's maybe some compliance pieces, but I agree. I mean, just with the flow of information these days, that's going to be something that we're probably going to have to. So hopefully one day you can write that headline. I think that's a good one. That's really smart.
Hold on to that.
For a long time, I would say, my headline was something along the lines of "Casual Fridays become all week." That was a big one I was hoping to write. That's pretty much more or less come true for your day. So but it took so long. This is another thing that goes on with the profession. Things move at a fairly sedate and majestic pace. Changes. The profession has generally been able to adopt changes at a fairly carefully managed pace, so that it was never anything too overwhelming. So we're never able to really write a big headline like that and say everyone's done it, because it takes anywhere from 5 to 10 years, depending on the change. The adoption of the cloud, for instance, that's one you'd love to write. Say everyone's now in the cloud, and it was 15 years for the profession to get really sort of fully into the cloud. I think that's an extreme example. Usually it's more 3 to 5 years for a big change to come into place, but.
This would be interesting. But I did hear like a long time ago, they're like, hey, if you ever watch movies, the future was already written in a movie from 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Just watch all the developments. It's almost like the movies inspire people to think about, oh, that is possible, or how do I make that work? Maybe that's you, man. Your casual Fridays became everything. You just kind of kept always writing about it. So maybe instead of something you hope to be able to write that is true past tense, maybe you just need to start writing it all the time. That way people are like, oh yeah, everybody else is doing it, I better figure it out.
Well, I think that's, I'm not saying we're driving it, but I think that there are firms that are out ahead in any area, and it's not necessarily always the same firm. In every area, there's firms who are experimenting with it, and when other firms hear they're doing it, they say, I'm going to see how they do, and if it works out, okay for them. So that's one of the things we do, right? Is we're constantly, if there's a big topic coming up, we're like, all right, we're going to have to cover this for 3 to 5 years. We've got to find the people who are out ahead doing it right, and we've got to write about them, because accountants won't actually listen to us. They'll listen to us because we're quoting accountants, right? Accountants want to learn from other CPAs, which is, again, one of the things I love about the profession is that everyone in the profession is willing to share what's going on with them. To a degree, you're right. I wouldn't credit us. I would credit the firms that are sort of leading the way. And our role is just to say, hey, listen, that's what they're doing. You should think about doing that, because you're going to have to in 3 to 5 to 6 years.
I like that.
You sort of reminded me of two things, if you don't mind. I'm going to one brief tangent, a little longer, that's a little closer to the profession is. One, there's a great Ray Bradbury short story about a guy who wants to shape the future, and he just makes a big scale model of what he thinks the city of the future should look like, makes it in his basement, and then pretends to have time traveled to it and taken pictures of it and says, this is what the city of the future is going to look like. And everyone believes him, and so he affects the future just by pretending that's
right. There you go.
But the other one is, I was thinking recently when Barry Melanson, who was head of the AICPA for 30 years or so, recently stepped down last year. And he, if you remember way back in the early 2000s, they had proposed a new credential called Cognitor, which kind of got sort of crushed, and people sort of like, it's a silly name. It wasn't a great name, but what at the time, it ran into a lot of headwinds, and a lot of people were like, it's a dumb name. What is it? We don't even know what this is. And when you actually look back, I went back and looked at some of the things they were talking about. What it really was just advisory work. They were proposing advisory work, but this is the early 2000s, and no one, and I'll say something, I don't think their messaging was particularly good around it, but the real goal of it was really to foreground advisory services and the advisory role of the profession, and to background compliance, still keep compliance, because that's what makes you great at the advisory stuff, is your knowledge and insights from the compliance work. But that's
You're still here, right, Adam? Okay. Asking to back up when he comes back on.
But no one knows that. I don't know if that's on my end. It probably is, though. There's no one in my office, so our Wi-Fi should be pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, you were the one frozen for Adam and me. So
Yeah, no,
at the moment, we're
I
going to
was
blame you.
willing to guess it's on my end, but I
Okay.
closed as many times as I can close. So, but um, my other sort of tangent that I want to talk just briefly about is I don't know if y'all remember back in the early 2000s, the AICPA proposed a new sort of credential and a new focus for the profession, and the name they chose for it was cognitor, which was
Okay.
That's awful. Yeah.
widely ridiculed.
Yeah.
People made a lot of fun of it. And they were like, what is this? What are they talking about? What's this role? This is crazy. And what it really was, if we look back at it now, and I did recently when Barry Melanson, who was head of the ASPA for 30 years, retired, and he'd been a champion of this cognitor. I look back at what it was, and really what they were talking about was advisory. What they were proposing was
Mm,
the cognitor was, taking the CPA was the person who looked at your numbers and they did your compliance work, but the cognitor was the CPA who looked ahead for you and advised you on what to do. And really, it was, like I said, it was just advisory work. And it's the stuff we now say every firm should be doing this. And why aren't you doing it? Why haven't you been doing it for the last 5 years? And it's just, it seems natural. It's the conventional wisdom now that accounting firms need to boost their advisory practices and move more to that role. But 20 years ago, people sort of made fun of it and were like, "This is crazy. We don't want to do this. This is nuts." And just like to fast forward 20 years, and suddenly it's the conventional wisdom. I will say a big part of it
mm.
was the messaging. It wasn't very clear messaging, and the title "Cognitor" was pretty silly. But the idea was just the great idea. Just happened to be 15, 20 years ahead of its time,
Yeah.
or maybe not so much ahead of its time, but ahead of the profession's ability to sort of digest it and say, "Yeah, this is what we should be doing." So the question is, what crazy ideas are people having now that in 20 years we'll be like, yep, that was normal. And
Yeah,
I'll go ahead
it
and say
should
I think
stick.
ESG may be one of those.
Okay. If you don't mind, let's double click on AI for a second. It's hard to have a future
Sure.
conversation. I mentioned
Yeah.
AI, but a lot of my clients talk about it. Not surprising. Everyone is so general, and it's sort of like we should do more with AI. I'd love to hear
Right.
a little bit more what you're seeing that you think is really cool. That in accounting, they're like, here's where they're actually doing
Right.
some things.
Well, one of the things you're seeing, I was just looking at a demo yesterday of somebody who's working AI in sort of tax research and the things you can do. And it was things
Mm,
like you can say, all right, give me, break this law down for a client for me, something from OBBA, saying, break this law down, this element of it that's really important for my client. And I need it to have a sort of a focus on specific days and dates and deadlines because my client is super into calendaring and very punctual and very much about dates. And it could provide this tool was able to provide a breakdown of this. I can't remember what the aspect of the bill
mhm.
was. There's a billion in them, but so it was able to do that and to give it the tone and the focus that the client wanted, or that the accountant knew that the client wanted. And I thought that was a fascinating example. I think that's still a little early for a lot of firms, to be relying on it. No one would say that you should ever send that out without reviewing it yourself. But that
Sure.
ability to take information, a vast amount of information, right? There's so much in that bill and there's so much being talked about it, to take that and to say, all right, I need this distilled down to the most important facts for this client and presented in a way that this client will like. And just the time savings and energy savings and thought savings that would go into taking care of all that for you. So you can then go and look and say, okay, yes, is it correct? One, you got to check and make sure that it's right because,
Mhm.
like any intern or young staffer, it can make mistakes. And then make sure that it fits your client and doesn't sound clunky. But I thought, there's things like that where it's going to save a huge amount of time in drafting uh, everything you have to write.
Mhm.
It's going to be better at and faster at. Now, you're then going to need to tweak it. There's no question, right? Again, it's to think of it as
Right.
a young staffer. I think that's a great example that we're going to see it, and we're going to see it in a million different areas. We're going to see it in things like engagement letters. Every
Mhm.
insurer in the world is like, oh, please, please, please have all your engagement letters done by AI because then maybe you'll do them. They'll be faster, so you won't feel as much of a problem, and you'll actually get them out there, and they'll cover all the things we need them to cover. Then I think where it starts to get really crazy and interesting, and that's why I said stuff that's a little further down the line is where it starts to really not just pick over information and pick out the highlights, but to analyze it and really think deeply about it and say, hey, you know what's going on at this client? This weird thing we've noticed these 17 points correlate with these 17 points in these other businesses that are doing things they want to do. I think that level of and the ability to do that alone right now, you can do data analytics that will provide you some of that information if you lead the way. But I think we're going to find it's going to start to be able to do that for you. If you just say, hey, go look through this information and find out stuff that's weird. find out weird correlations, find out weird patterns. We're looking for patterns that a human being could never see because they can't, for instance, look out over 17,000 sets of books from all the businesses in this
Mm-hmm.
particular industry, or look at 20,000 leases that this company has because it's got a lot of leased equipment and so on, and figure out what the big problems are or the major commonalities. I think that stuff's going to be a little further down the road, but when it comes, it's going to be amazing. I don't know
Yeah.
if that got any closer to that's still
Oh,
pretty general, I realize, but
no, those are
Yeah.
both good examples. One that I'll tell you a quick story with that. I have one client who is incredible at using AI. It's just amazing the things says he's doing. But I went to one financial statement meeting where 2 days before, sent in the financial statement, a huge write up that we had, and he came in and said, "Hey, we have other topics to talk about, but let me show you what AI told me about the financial statement," and had the summary that was incredible. But what I learned about it, well, he said, "What do you think?" And in my mind, I'm like, "I think that's a lot better than what I was bringing to the table." But what I found impressive is he said, "Well, I've got my company strategy. I've got the minutes of every single meeting we've ever had. I've got my annual plan." So it was making comments that I wasn't catching, like, "Hey, here's where you are relative to the next 5 years. The valuation of your company is now changing." And it was in doing that, but it was looking over, I don't know, a couple hundred pages worth of things plus the financial statement. So similar to what you're saying, look at all this stuff and have it draw things out was very impressive.
and it's always present, right? That's the thing is, an accountant may have seen all that information, may be familiar with all that stuff, whether it's their business or a client's business, but to keep it all present in your mind
Right.
is hugely difficult.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that will be interesting, I suspect this will happen with a lot of AI, is that it will just um, it'll get baked into a lot of things you do. Right now, we think of AI as something. Oh, how will I use AI, and what will I do with AI, and how will I build this whatever I'm doing with AI? But I think over the long term, we're going to see a lot of that just gets, the AI gets backgrounded, and it's just a function. It just says, you just
Yeah.
hit analyze, and it goes through and gives you all this information, and you're not really going to even be thinking about it as AI. You're just going to be thinking about, wow, this is a great report.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I'll look at it because I want to make sure it makes sense before I send it to my client. I want to make sure I understand it before I send it to my client. But we won't think of it as AI the way we do now. I think that's going to just
Yeah.
become just a thing we're much more accustomed to, and it won't seem as scary. But it'll take a while for that to get baked into software and become routine. Right now, it's, as you say, it's the guy who's really good at AI who can get those reports.
Yes.
Who knows the prompt engineering to refine a report down to the level where all he needs to do is make sure it sounds like a human being wrote it, and that it doesn't have any glaring horrible mistakes,
Of course.
or
Yes.
that it doesn't make anything up. But once we get beyond the point where it's really only working really well for experts, that's when people are going to be able to start using it a lot. It's when it's plug and play for people who are afraid of AI. That way.
Mhm. I'm curious your thoughts then as we look forward for agents, right? I think a lot of what we've been talking about is kind of how do I use it and ask questions.
Right.
What about the thought of an agent saying, no, it's going to be going out and working on my behalf and actually doing things and maybe bringing things to me?
Right.
Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. The best comment I heard was someone saying that this year may be the last year, and I'm not remembering now if they said they meant 2025 or 2026. But anyways, the
Mhm.
next 12 months are going to be the last time that anybody is purely a manager of people. That going
Oh.
forward, you're going to be a manager of people and of agents. And I think that's one of the interesting things that you
Mm,
said, well, what does this mean for me? And I think what it means is you're going to have to be good at managing a constellation of actors who on your behalf, right? Some of them will be AI agents, and some of them will be people. And just as with people, where you have to say, well, I know this person is good at this, but not so good at this, so I'll assign them certain tasks based on their skills. I won't ask Bobby to speak in front of a crowd because he's uncomfortable speaking in front of a crowd. But Jean isn't great at the deep analysis, but she is great at presentation.
mhm.
So I'll divide it up that way. You're going to have to get to know your agents as well and say, all right, this agent knows how to do this. This agent is great at going out and calendaring staff and scheduling staff and figure out who fits who fits this task and who doesn't, or who's
Yeah.
available, et cetera, and managing all that. And some will be good at the actual work that they're going to be doing. And so you need to be able to say, okay, what agents do I deploy to what areas? What agents aren't working in the things I'm asking them to do?
Mhm.
Which agents are built for which things? I mean, we're going to discover one of the things we're discovering about GPTs and LLMs is that they're definitely based. It's not based. They're definitely good at different things, and I don't think everybody realizes that Some of them are good at language. Some of them are good at math. Some of them are good at
Hmm.
science. Some of them there's ones that are trained on Excel and are really good at Excel. So we're gonna discover more and more that what you need to know about agents is what they're good at and what you want to use them for and how they interact with the rest of your agents and the rest of your human team. So it's going to, in a weird way, it's going to become more of a management issue than a technology
Yeah.
issue.
I like the way thinking about that. And if I think about it that way, just like your team, their skills also change over time. And
Yeah,
maybe I'll change more quickly, but you look at your team and Adam could say, well, Tom was never good at this, but maybe a year later, yes, now they are. Agents could be the same kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely.
You know
Interesting.
what's mildly irritating these days is I remember like RPA, like the robots, everybody had the bots. It
Yep.
was always like, and this is where I'm frustrated with our AI process right now in terms of saving us time,
Mhm.
is that it used to be the bots could do all the admin simple tasks, like go get your bank statements, do all this kind of stuff,
Mhm.
pull all this information to you. And then we'd always have to pick it up and take it the rest of the way. These agents that you're talking about, Tom, now they're all focused on getting all the work done, which is cool. The
Yep.
problem is because of security and technology, it's like it can't get any of the baseline information. So now we've
Oh,
like almost
interesting.
like been relegated down to like we got to be the administrative people
Yes.
for the agents, and it's like I don't know, it's just the complete opposite of where we were,
That
10 plus years ago, and I'm just like, what the
that's
heck?
funny.
We got to figure. That's where blockchain would come in, right? Is like
Yes.
blockchain would just make all that,
Yeah.
take that wall down, everything would interconnect, and then you drop AI on top of that. I guess I don't know, but that's
That's fascinating. I've heard
Fascinating.
similar, as you know, Adam, sometimes with offshoring, it's similar. Like the offshore, they can't have the bank. So you're doing the same thing, like, oh, we pull bank statements and then give it to them to process, right? And
right.
just like you
Like
said, it's a similar thing, and you could be doing the same for AI.
Right. Right.
exactly. So
Wow.
that's I don't know. That's kind of shifting gears though towards the profession. I mean, a couple other big topics that are um, seem to always be kind of evergreen for the most part. One is like M&A specifically around PE,
Yeah.
and how that
Mhm.
impacts the broader ecosystem, and then also like the changes coming into the profession in terms of I heard like Gen Z all of a sudden is now accounting is a really cool and hip profession.
Hmm.
Everybody's wanting to do it. They're talking about taking off the 5th year to sit for the CPA.
Right.
So I'll let you go wherever you want to go there, like PE or talk about like kind of, everybody's worried about this huge wave of everybody retiring and they're not being enough people to backfill. But now AI, everybody's worried about them taking their jobs, which by the way, we said weren't going to exist, like we didn't have enough people for. But now all these Gen Zers are like, I think they saw the inflation of wages and we're just like, I think I like accounting again. But
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, let me start with that because I think that's I'm fascinated by how we went from capacity crisis and pipeline shortage, which we still have, to a degree, to actually things are okay. Right, we're hearing from a lot of firms now. Actually, yeah, we've got all the people we need. We're in pretty good shape. We still have way too much work, but that's because we just keep taking on work and not
Mhm.
rationalizing what we want to do and picking the people we want to work with and the best clients and so on. But it's interesting because it's sort of eased, and suddenly people are like, hey, wait a minute, my capacity problems aren't as big as they were. Well, the reason they aren't, there's a bunch of reasons, but some of the big ones are, right. All the things you did when the staff crunch was at its worst, right? You started doing outsourcing. You started working with firms in India or the Philippines or Mexico, and you started automating lots and lots of things, and you started making sure that your technology was up to all that automation. And so they solved a lot of problems, or a lot of the sort of what seemed like stopgaps at the time before we could begin, getting people back into accounting. They were sort of like, hey, that actually worked, and so things are a little easier than they were when things were at their worst. The salary thing I think is huge. We did our salary survey for the second time this year. The first year we did it, discovered that young accountants, entry level accountants, were getting about $10,000 less a year on average than people in most other sort of business professions, kind of thing, and in technology, in finance, even in business, in the accounting departments of businesses.
Mm-hmm.
they were getting less than that, right? Public accountants in public accounting were getting about $10,000 less. And it's like, wow, that's a huge reason for people not to come into the profession, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're talking to their friends and their age mates, their classmates who are going to work for law firms and tech firms and for investment banks, and they're all getting much bigger salaries. So why would they come to accounting? This year's survey literally the entry level average went up $10,000. Like they saw the gap and said, "Oh, we got to start paying everybody enough." So and to a certain extent, the reason those things are getting fixed is because accounting firms are fixing the things that make them less attractive. I will say, one of the other things accounting is always attractive when times are tough or when people feel uncomfortable about the economy, right? So you hear a lot about job
Mm-hmm.
hugging, right? People don't want to leave. That had been the problem for accountants for a long time, right? They weren't getting paid the salaries they wanted, and it was easy to go to another firm because they were desperate for staff. Well, as they get less desperate for staff, it's less easy for you to jump from job to job to job. So you're going to stick, and if you're worried about the economy, you stick with your job at your current firm, and that's one of the things that accounting has always had going for them in difficult economic times, or when people thought times were difficult economically, is that people feel like it's a very stable profession. Right. So in a time like this, where people are a little uncertain about where things are going and what's going to happen in the next couple of years, accounting is a great feels like a great profession. It feels like, and it is. Accounting firms continue to grow even in the worst of times. 3-4% growth doesn't sound that great, except if you're getting 3-4% growth in 2020 and 2021 in the depths of the worst medical emergency the country's seen since 1918. So I think that. We're going to continue to see that shift. The number of people coming into the profession. I don't know if it'll be as attractive as it might have been in the 90s, because we've definitely seen, since then it's the percentage of people going to college who enter accounting has kind of dropped in half. Whether that will come back, I don't know, but it certainly can't get. It's going to get better than it was 5 years ago, and the need for staff is probably going to, I don't want to say decline, but it's not going to increase at as great a rate as it did in the past, over the last 5 years, as technology and outsourcing and AI started coming online in a big way and really making it easier for firms to handle. It's I realize that's sort of all over the map there, but it's a big thing with a lot of moving pieces that make it sort of difficult to summarize. But I think
generally they're doing them. Sorry. I was just saying, like, I do think they're doing the right thing, like trying to take that 5th year off. I think that was an obstacle for the profession and a lot of people. I think we're also losing the, you're going to work 70 hours a week kind of thing. Obviously, I know, PE, kind of circling back to that kind of is actually, that could probably hurt the, the attractiveness of it, because you're no longer going to kind of, not that everybody wanted to be a partner anyway, but, just that landscape is going to look a lot different. But as far as the technology goes, I don't know. I'll be interested to see if it impacts the offshore more than it does anything else, because it just seems like, I don't know, the abacus was a little bit before my time, but when we went to the calculator, and then no different than, I never did a tax return. Well, I shouldn't say that. I did some 1040 EZs by hand, but for the most part, I wasn't doing a corporate or a partnership tax return by hand. People 20, so I don't know. I look at the technology like you do. I think it's just going to be embedded in everything that we do, that you're not necessarily going to see it as like, hey, did you hear about the World Wide Web? It's like, like we were 20 some years ago, the internet.
Right.
I feel like that's kind of like you said, we've created this thing called AI, but at the end of the day, it'll just be a part of everything that we do. And I don't know that it'll just kind of sneak into everything. And I don't know if anybody will really necessarily think about it that way. It'll just enable us to do more faster.
Yeah, and it will get rid of a lot of that grunt work. I mean, you talk about right now, we're having terrible, and with agents as they come in, you're going to have terrible problems with information, spreading, bringing information between organizations or between technologies. That's going to be a problem for a bit, but then people will solve it, right? And we'll probably, for 5 years after they solve it, we'll all be like, man, it's terrible that we have to do all this stuff to bring all this information from system to system, and then suddenly we'll be like, oh wait, I haven't actually done that in 2 years because they solved it 2 years ago, and I just like to complain about it because, let's face it, complaining is fun. And it was such a pain for the 2 or 3 years that we had to do it that it sticks in your mind. But yeah, I mean, there's a degree to which I think you're right that the 150-hour rule, those changes are going to bring more people into the profession. It's one of those things, though, because all those things are moving. The number of people going back to college and the ripples still playing out from all the generation of people who were affected by COVID college experiences and so on. That's, a lot of that's still working its way out of the system. How people look at careers is changing. I think this is one of the problems we have in terms of coverage is figuring out, which piece is moving and making a difference, right? Just keeping up, because we get stuck in sort of, okay, this is how we think about this problem now. And then in 6 months, we can't think about it anymore that way. We need to think about it a different way, but we're still thinking about it the way we thought about 6 months ago. And I think everyone runs into this problem in every profession, in every industry. Things are changing so quickly that you can't stick with one paradigm. You can't say, okay, now I understand this, because by the time you understand it, someone will have done something to change it, which is very annoying.
Sure.
But but I try. I keep not talking about PE, and I should be talking about it. We just had a big PE summit that was fantastic, and I love it, and I learned a ton about it. And one of the things I learned there and keep learning is that whole universe is changing enormously as well. Like, we think of it's PE, but it's not just PE. Even among PE firms, there's 3 or 4 different flavors of PE models that they're working with accounting firms in. And then the other groups of people who are starting to come in already in terms of family office money, venture capitalists with venture capital with different time horizons and different expectations of the firms they buy or partner with. And then banks that are coming in and looking to partner with accounting firms. And we haven't yet seen a sovereign wealth fund or a pension fund, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's coming up at some point. Those are attractive. And then, people keep promising that within a year we'll see a big accounting firm do an IPO. So that's, just the range of changes there. I think you're right to suggest that too much PE ownership may give the profession, make the profession less attractive to some people coming on board. But I think more and more we're going to see that conversation isn't dominated by PE the way it is now, and people will just start thinking, well, accounting firms are just, they're owned like kind of like any business can be. They can be an ESOP, they can be a regular partnership, they can be they can be owned by PE, and it will depend what firm you choose to work with. I don't think we're going to find that everybody ends up getting owned by PE. We may find that more and more firms have non-partnership structures or have partnership structures, but have significant minority investment from other people. But I think as the number of partners and outside strategic investors increases, as more firms look at that, we're going to see that for good and ill, that impact gets mitigated a little bit or sort of spread out.
So for the PE summit, I'm curious kind of what the tone was in there. You've got a lot of people afraid of PE. How will it change? Things like that. What do you think the tone was within the summit for the attendees?
I will say that the tone is still pretty much like, this is there are tremendous opportunities out there for firms, right? Whatever you need to do, there are ways to do it, what you want to do. If you need capital, there's a million ways to get it. Yes, PE is still kind of the big dog in the room, but there's lots of other ways to get it. If you want to remain independent, there's ways to do it. The main lesson is you can kind of get anything you need, but you need to plan for it. You need to think about it. None of it's just going to happen. And I think for the sort of straight up normal partnership structure, it's been in place for so long and it's worked for so long that for a lot of firms, they're like, yep, that's what we're doing. We're sticking with that, and not realizing or not looking at the opportunities to say you can do a lot more and maybe achieve a lot more if you look around. It doesn't have to be with PE. It might be some other format, but there's a lot more options and a lot more ways you can structure a firm. So that the options are there if you want to take them, and more I think firms are going to need to take some option, whatever it might be.
Okay. Oh, that's excellent. Well, Dan, we've covered a lot of different topics. I would imagine many of our listeners, I would hope, have really enjoyed learning from you. Other ways people can learn from you? We didn't even mention books you've written, other things you've done. What are things that people are like, I want to learn more about what this guy's saying? What can they do?
There's Accounting Today. I'm there every day. accountingtoday.com. We got a podcast that goes out when I'm on the ball. It goes out weekly. I'm not always on the ball. But we got a lot of events. We've got a lot of conferences and virtual events and webinars that we're out there putting on. And I would always, it's a good place to sort of check in on a regular basis, accountingtoday.com, check in and see what's going on. Just to not necessarily everything you need to know, but point you to the main developments in the profession every day.
Okay. So last question for you. The other day, and this is probably maybe just an Anders thing, or from our summit days, because we work with a lot of creative agencies. But one of our team members said, "Hey, you know what? I would love to not hear the word asynchronous in the year 2026. Like, we way overuse asynchronous. It's like we latched onto this smart word and just kind of hung on to it. But you're writing this stuff every day, so." And then Tom, I'd love to hear if you can kind of think of something too here. Yeah. But what's the most overused phrase that you can think of in our space?
Well, you had said I wasn't really thinking specifically accounting. I was thinking of what I use. I have made a vow to stop using the word wheelhouse so much, just because it's at first it was like, oh, that's a great way to describe what we all know what a wheelhouse is, but now it's just become lazy and got to find a new way to do it.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, it can be personal, or it can be that's good.
But I'm sure I can think of 2 or 3 things for accounting that I'm like, we don't need to hear that anymore. Let me think about that for a second. Tom, why don't you jump in? You got one you want to?
Sort of. So yes, I do. Not a specific phrase, but I have started actually calling my clients and my team on this. I was in a company where one of the VPs would call people on what he called weasel words. So I'm thinking I might give this a shot kind of thing. And you're like, no, are you putting an action plan together and what's the date? And so that is the one that I've really trying to reinforce with clients who are like, I should probably be thinking about, should I get a line of credit in place at some point, was with conversation yesterday. And so I called the owner and I was like, I've just showed you that you're going to need the money in the next couple of months. Like, what are you doing by the next time we meet to show me that you're actually taking action on this? Right. So not a specific word, but trying to get people to be clear.
Excellent. I will. You know what? This is the one, and I should have thought of this right away. I'm going to add to, and I think Adam, you mentioned it, described it a little earlier. I will say one thing we all need to stop doing is talking about how terrible tax season is. It is. But we need to stop talking about it. The number of accountants who are bragging about how terrible their tax season is, that needs to stop, because no one wants to hear it. Young people are like, no, I don't. That doesn't sound attractive. Why would I? Why would I?
That's an excellent point.
Yeah, we had a great a panel at a conference where it was young accountants. I mean, like just all in their 20s, all had mostly just started working in accounting, and at some point, a member of the audience, an older guy who was a partner at a firm, stepped up and said, "Well, you should know that when I was your age and I was working at a firm, I would sleep on the floor of my office for 4 days out of the week during tax season. That's what I did." And the person on stage said, "I'm sorry. That sounds terrible. I'm really sorry for you. That must have been an awful way to grow up, an awful way to start your career. What a terrible thing for you. I feel bad." And it just, the guy just sort of wilted. And it was like, let's stop talking about that.
And I'm scared to work for you, because even if that's not the expectation, it's probably not too far behind it.
Exactly. Right. You're hurt people. You're going to invent your trauma from your career, early days of your career. I don't want to work there. I would say stop telling the war stories.
Adam, were you thinking of a
wheelhouse to do that? So
nice. Did you have in your mind a word or phrase you like, or was asynchronous the one that you were thinking of?
Okay, popped up in my head. It wasn't necessarily in the profession. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get a little sick of hearing AI as a thing. Like I said, I do look forward to the day whenever it's just kind of in everything we do. Like I said, we don't talk about the internet necessarily as like a noun anymore. You know what I mean? I think it will switch into a verb and it'll just be whatever.
Yeah, that's great.
There'll be something else annoying that comes up. That's sort of just the. Although I will say, one of the nice things about there's a lot to be said against the incredible fast pace of change that's coming on now, right? The need to adapt it constantly is terrifying, etc. One thing is nice is that one of the reasons those words become annoying, right, is because the change that they represent takes a long time to get baked in, right? So you hear it a lot. The faster change comes, the less time we'll have to hear annoying things. So as more people get used to asynchronous communication, we won't be saying, "Oh, it's asynchronous communication." We'll just be saying, "No, it's just I'll email you when I want to email you, and you'll respond when you want to respond," and that's great. Yes. We won't have to say it's asynchronous.
But it sounds so smart.
It does.
For like 2 months, though. It sounds smart for 2 months. The third, fourth month, you start to be like, yeah, okay, we get it.
Get a new word. Like, did your calendar word thing fall off?
Yes. You used your word 3 times today.
Excellent.
Dan, I feel like we could go on forever, but we do have to cut this off. I appreciate you telling us the different ways that people can continue hearing this content. That's really helpful, and really appreciate you taking time to talk to us today. It was very enjoyable.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a great conversation.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.